Welcome everybody to today's webinar presented by Cornerstone Home Inspector Education Center. My name is Jim Enowich. Tonight's speaker is Tom Paterno. He will be sharing his expertise and experience with us. He will cover James Hardie products and the best practices and tips for conducting a thorough inspection. I want to thank him for being here tonight. I want to thank all our new members for joining us tonight on the start of something really exciting. If you have any questions, you can type your message in and Tom will see them or I will see them and we will relay them. So let's dive into today's program. And again, thank you for joining us. And I hope you find this webinar really useful and informative. So I'll turn it over to Tom.
Thanks, man. Hey guys, I'm Tom Paterno from James Hardie. I've been with the company, it'll be 9 years this summer. I've done a bunch of different roles, one of them being our install specialist, as we call it. And we're just going to go through some of the best practices and install requirements when it comes to Hardie, why you guys might have seen some funky things in the field. Let me share my screen here. Enable entire screen. Cool. Let me know. Can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes.
Good. Thank you.
Cool. So this would be the James Hardie training. We do have a website that is really good. I still use it, and it's usually for a lot of commercial applications because it can get pretty in the weeds. So jameshardipros.com is a great resource when it comes to install practices or any specific type of install when it comes to residential or commercial for all of our products. And it is free. So our general install requirements, this is the quick screenshot of like what we're going to go after or the agenda, as we would say. We'll dive into each one specifically. There are install best practice sheets. If you guys need any of that stuff, we can shoot them over. So when you're on a project, you can quickly look and you'll see the pictures and it describes everything about the clearances or requirements that you would need to have to keep our warranty. So the first one would be siding to ground. Hardie is engineered that when it's on the wall, and I might get a little repetitive as I go through these, but the main point is that Hardie's engineered when it's on the wall to shed water down and away from the home. So install cladding, it needs to be 6 inches from the siding to the ground. So you want to stay 6 inches off the grade. And here are some examples. You can see in the left picture, the middle picture, they're 6 inches off, and in the right picture is where they installed the Hardie directly to the grade. There's just a chance that water is going to build up there, or mainly snow. So I know we haven't gotten much snow, but if as a cementitious product, if Hardie sits in water, it can absorb it, and then that's where you have some issues. And just so you know, I can't see the chat box, so if there's any questions, just interrupt me. It's totally cool. Siding to steps in hard surfaces. So it says a clearance of 1 to 2 inches must be maintained. That's because in the south, it's only 1 inch. In the northeast, it's 2 inches from steps past driveways or other hard surfaces. Again, this would be to avoid any water buildup, no buildup. And usually the question is, when it comes to installers, what do we do for that 2-inch clearance? A lot of guys will do over here on the right picture a Z flash. Some will also do a 2-inch PVC band board, and then they'll stay a 1/4 inch over that. But as long as it's 2 inches off the steps, as you can see here in the left-hand picture, that would suffice our requirements for the steps and the hard surfaces. Siding to deck is also going to be 2 inches. Mainly, you'll see this in the backyard. This is where a lot of people, especially in a backyard, if you have kids or dogs, they'll do that 2-inch like PVC or different product that's against the deck to keep that 2 inches off. but it's the deck and the steps, they're similar, where you have to stay 2 inches off the ground. Sheltered areas can be a little different. Sheltered area would just be if there's like a 6-foot overhang where you can come down to be a 1/4 inch off the ground there, because the snow buildup or water buildup isn't going to be there, like a step or a deck or something like that. So the porch roof overhang, that's where that requirement would change, where it'd be a 1/4 inch off that area. There's some good examples of pictures here. Especially, this is what we see a lot of, at least in New Jersey, with the columns. Horizontal flashing. So, like I said, I've been here 9 years. This would be one of the biggest where people either do not do this or they do it wrong. So any horizontal flashing, any horizontal break, like for example, in the top right here, this would be, for example, you see a lot of board and batten. And if you're doing the whole front of the house in board and batten, there would be a break at the, like 10 foot up, there would be a break. So you would need to have a break here with a Z flashing, because that would be 2 panels meeting, and you would want to have a Z flashing with a 1/4 inch gap. That is to avoid any water buildup, or if water got behind the siding or something like that, it would come down and away from the house. But the most common would be over the window trim. So there's 2 ways I've seen guys do this wrong, and it's not necessarily their fault. Maybe they don't know how to install Hardie properly. So they'll put this Z flashing underneath the trim. So they're flashing the window, but they are not flashing the top of the siding. So the top piece of trim on this window would be considered a horizontal break, where you would need a Z flash in a 1/4 inch gap. Again, preventing any water buildup. You don't want Hardie sitting in water or any table for it to sit on.
Tom, what about roofs? Roofs to Hardie.
Roofs might be the next slide. It's within the next 2 or 3. And that is also one of the most popular ones I see. The other way I've seen guys do it wrong is, a good example is here. So this would be, I think this is a display wall, where this would be the pretend window where you see the piece of OSB here. So they will flash over the trim, but then they'll caulk it. So the flashing almost, it's not serving as anything, because it's caulked, no gap on top of the flashing. Water can sit there and eventually could be absorbed by the Hardie.
Does it expand and contract like a little bit?
So when Hardie goes up dry, it does not move on the wall. It's dimensionally stable. The only time you'll see movement is if people, and we'll get into it a little later in the presentation, but when Hardie's on a job site, if it's not tarped and it rains for a day or two, and people will take the board and put it up wet, that's when there could be some movement. But when it's dry and it's up on the wall, it's not going to move.
Thank you.
No problem. So mortar to masonry, and this is Hardie. This is just Hardie and like brick or stone handling water different. I'm sure you guys do see this where you guys are, where if Hardie's running up to a wall with stone or brick, or even like a bump out like this with Hardie, you can definitely run our trim or our plank, anything up to it. You just want something separating the 2 products so they're not touching. So this would be a L flashing back there. So it's the L flash just serves as a buffer between the Hardie and the brick, so that if the brick's absorbing moisture and holding moisture, it's not kind of pushing that moisture into Hardie where it could absorb it, being a cementitious product. And you'll see on the vertical side here, it would be an L flashing. And then like we talked about on the previous slide, the horizontal break in a different product would be a Z flashing with a 1/4 inch gap. No caulk.
What's the gap for the L flashing? You can go butt it tight and go pretty tight.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You butt right up to it. So blocked penetrations, this is also something we do see a lot in the market. So any penetration coming out of the home that's bigger than 1.5 inches needs to be blocked off. And this is for two reasons. Aesthetically, I've seen aesthetically in the market, it's a tough cut for some guys to do a thin cut and have a hose coming out. So aesthetically, the blocking does look nicer. And the second more important reason is anything over 1 inch, 1.5 inches. When you caulk that big of a surface area, the caulk's not going to hold that forever. So it would look similar to like this that middle picture. It's going to be too much caulk. It's not going to handle water properly. And you're running the risk of the caulk failing. And then you have a hole in the siding where water can get in or Hardie can absorb it. So when you block your penetrations, again, it would be similar to the horizontal break where it's a 1/4 inch gap and a Z flash. And if it's big enough, you would do a weather cut. So in the examples to the left, that looks like one block of PVC where they just kind of cut through it and they did their Z flash with the gap. For an example, over to the right would be the weather cut, which is an angled cut. It's angled out. Again, water management. So when that cut's angled out, the water is going to come down and away if there was any water issues. Roof to wall. So that I might have misspoke. I think roof to wall clearances would probably be the number one thing that we do see wrong. Number 2 would be horizontal flashing over windows. So thank you for the correction there. I try to forget about roof to wall clearances, but so for roof to wall, it says 1 to 2 inches. We are in the Northeast, so it is 2-inch clearances. And again, that 2-inch gap, when it always seems to be an issue with homeowners when we say that that you need the 2-inch gap from the roof line. There's a bunch of different things you can do aesthetically. For example, the picture down on the right here with the home, you could do a color match coil. From the street view, you would not even notice there's a 2-inch gap there. But this would be where I've seen any failures over the years where Hardie would just sit in built up snow. Because I know in the past we've had some pretty rough winters. So that not so much as recently, but not even snow, water buildup, just constant water in this area. It could just get clogged up there and possibly absorbed by the Hardie. I know this one was probably the most popular. It is a simple fix, but any questions on the roof to wall? I'm thinking if when you guys are in the field, this might be the one you see the most.
No questions so far.
Cool. And if I talk too fast or I mumble through something, just correct me in the chat, or I have no problem with it. Kick out flashing. So for the kick out flashing, it's best described here. So where you have a wall and your roof line running down here. So typically there would be Hardie in the picture, like in the middle here with the blue. So the reason why you want a kick out flashing is to just divert any of that water coming down that roof line into the gutter. So this one I do not see a lot of mistakes here in our market. But for example, the picture to the right, which is pretty dramatic, I don't see a lot of this in the field, but this buildup here and this issue could be a problem with where the water is running down. If water is getting down behind anywhere, it's going to affect the siding. So this is a preventative measure for any water that might get behind the wall or build up in the gutter.
I usually see a lot where it starts to delaminate, Tom, where it starts because there's no kick out. Or
Yeah.
or the gap is too small.
Yeah, the delamination is a direct impact of Hardie's sitting in water. Because the way our product is made, it's painted on the front and all the sides, but the back is not painted. And there's a couple reasons. Cost would being one of them for manufacturing. Then the consumer buying it drives the cost of the product up. But also the way it's engineered, that doesn't the back can be, as we call, primed, which just means it's primed for paint. If it's installed properly, the back of it being primed doesn't affect the performance of the product over time. Where you see the issues is when it's sitting in water. That's where it can start sucking that up. Gutter placement, again, this is a requirement. Keeping it an inch off the siding, as in these two pictures you'll see here, is another preventative measure to keep water, any water issues from getting behind or the Hardie sitting in it. Again, like a backed up gutter here, you can end up having a pool of water where it can start to seep underneath that one lap where you see here. So it's a preventative measure from having any water issues when it comes to where the gutter is placed. Which I always think this slide should be before the other one, where then you have that inch gap and then you have the kick out flashing going down.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, one of our members asked, does that product need to be primed?
The Hardie?
Yes.
No. So Hardie is color plus finish. So no. So when Hardie says primed is a non-painted material. So we do sell product that does not come in color that can be field painted. I think we all know the cost of field paint in the Northeast, especially, is pretty high. So when Hardie comes painted, it's already primed, painted, and ready to go. But if someone wanted to paint it, you do not need to prime it. Hardie takes paint very well. You just need to make sure the siding's clean, and it will take exterior latex paint very well.
The back's primed though, right, Tom?
The back is primed, yeah. So there's no paint, nothing on it. You don't need to do anything to the back of it. Did that answer the question?
Yep, it does. He said thanks.
Okay. Sorry, sometimes I just start rattling stuff off.
That's okay. You're doing great.
So drip edge flashing. So when installers do use our board as a fascia board, you would want a drip edge flashing to go underneath that first row of shingles. Again, that's just water management. If water was getting behind the shingle, or if the shingle was short for some reason, which it shouldn't be, it's preventing water from getting kind of down and inside and behind. So you'd want a piece of drip edge flashing here, which the roofers typically do. But especially with remodels, if guys are ripping stuff off and they rip off a drip edge flashing from a previous install, you want to make sure that drip edge flashing is over the fascia board. So Hardie trim boards are fascinating. There's a couple different ways, and that's why I've seen some. I've talked to some people in the market, and they thought it was installed wrong. So you can install Hardie either face nailed with trim nails here, or there's a blind nail system. So if you do see our trim in the field and there's face nails on it, or it does not have face nails, either way, both installs are okay. The best way to install it, if you are doing face nailing, would leave this laminate on the product. So since it's a face nail, they'd put the nail through the laminate, touch up the nail head, and then take the laminate off. Because I'll talk about in a second here, a pre-finished product compared to when field paint gets on it, that's where there can be some issues. So our trim board layout. So our sorry, my dog started like crying for some reason. Okay, there's the kids outside. So the Hardie trim board layout. So the difference between our Hardie trim and competitive products, we'll say, is Hardie's 12-foot lengths, especially on the corners of homes. It's going to be longer than 12 feet. And competitive or other products have 16-foot runs, 20-foot runs. So with Hardie, you would want to do a weather cut. So on the corner, and you'd want the weather cuts to be on different sides. So we're a 2-piece corner. It's made to mimic wood. So if this would be the front of the house to the left, and then your seam where the next board would meet it would be on the side of the house. And then you would have your weather cuts like here, and they'd be staggered. And this is the best practice for water management. If you have both of your seams here, that could just cause an issue. So having your weather cuts staggered prevents any, it has a greater chance of preventing water damage. Hardie plank fastening. So when it's on the board, if you're doing a home inspection, you're not going to see where it's fastened because it is a blind nail system. So on the board, say it's an 8 1/4-inch board, it laps over an 1 1/4 to give you a 7-inch exposure, and then so on with our different sizes. What I will say to this is if you see planks on the wall and they might be like bumped out a little bit where the butt joints are, a good example is this middle picture here. So this would be what we call a butt joint. And we want our butt joints to have moderate contact. So there would be no, there's no requirement, or you would not leave any spaces for movement like other products. They would butt up tight. If you do see where a butt joint, usually where I'll see it is they'll not be level with each other. It is approved to put a finish nail, through the face of it, as long as they touch up just the finish nail head. So if you do see any face nails, that could just be how the house is laying or the sheathing. If the wall isn't straight, Hardie's not going to lay straight. But for the most part, if you see a bunch of face nails on our product that's lap siding or shingle, they probably did not install it right. We'd have to figure out why they did that.
Any caulk in between those butt joints, or you just leave it be, paint it?
There would be no caulk in between the butt joints. I think it comes up later, but I'll just touch on it now. Anytime you cut a piece of Hardie, you would touch up that cut end. It reseals the product, and the touch-up paint acts as a sealant from any water or anything like that. And I'll be honest, it is hard to tell sometimes on a butt joint if they did paint it. But you might be able to tell. I mean, it's hard. You're not going to go through every butt joint of a 3,000 square foot home to make sure they painted it properly. But that's one of the requirements with Hardie. Cut ends need to be touched up with paint.
That's why we have so much problem with all that wood, that pine around the trim around doors, because they don't paint the ends, and the water wicks up it and rots it. So I'm sure it's not going to be, because this is cement board, but we see that all the time, on a lot of homes.
Yeah.
And they don't.
And the movement with Hardie, if it does absorb some water, the movement isn't going to be much of a problem as you said, like the delamination. That's where the finish and the color can really start to look bad. Siding layout, and again, this is an aesthetic thing. So you do want to stagger your butt joints so you don't have the same look. If a home does have, like, if someone ran just these two, the first two planks, like side by side all the way up, it doesn't ruin the warranty of the product. Staggering the butt joints is definitely an aesthetic thing when it comes to how it looks on the home. So this would be the best practice to stagger your butt joints this way. And every time I say butt joints, it's a Hardie term that's in my head. It's where two planks are meeting, in a wall, across a wall. This is just more. So this is how you would start. I don't think we're siders here.
So Tom, just the thing we see correct me if I'm wrong. We see a lot of stuff starting to pop out. Is that, I mean, when you're nailing it, you almost have to know where each one of those those studs are. I mean, here, that's a stud, that's inside. How do they find that? Do they use a stud finder? I mean, if these guys, if it's all, siding's on, underlayment's on, and now you're coming up, how do they go about finding that, without, going crazy and trying to.
Yeah, so on a lot of the house wraps, if they do know where a stud is before they put the house wrap on, and it's 16 on center, they can align the house wrap with like the top of house wraps, and on the bottom in the middle, they'll have almost snapped chalk lines on them or little X's that show would be like you're snapping a line on the house wrap. So if you know where one of your studs is when you're putting the house wrap on, you align it with that, and you could check as you go. But for the most part, if they know where one stud is, they kind of go 16 on center from there. If it's not stud nailed, you would go every 8 inches through the sheathing. So it's every 16 on center hitting stud, or every 8 inches. Part of the problem too would be, and I should have touched on this, I apologize. So good question. The nail line here in this middle picture, if you high nail, that's where you can get movement in the product eventually, because the nail line, like Hardie spends, $25 to $50 million in research and development. So whether it's how that product's engineered or how it goes on the wall, where it's nailed, everything that goes into the product being made and installed and how it'll perform is tested. So every nail, even here, you can see it's not perfectly on the nail line, but if it's in that area vicinity, as close to the nail line as possible, the movement on the wall or the popping is going to be at a very low minimum. And again, and like I mentioned earlier, if the sheathing or something's wrong with the house structurally, it's going to affect how Hardie lays on the wall.
Well, hey, Tom, one of our members wrote that he's seen butt joints with gaps, suspect due to cold weather, and the flashing behind it is visible. Maybe suggest painting the flashing so it matches, so it's not so visible. Is that something?
Yeah, I would say so. For the butt joints, there's good, better, best. So a piece of tar paper, like house wrap. This is like the good or better, like tar paper house wrap. Bearskin makes a pre-cut product. That's for that. But the best is color match coil. The same coil that would be used for like your 2-inch Z flash. Guys will bend it in the field. 2-inch break on the roof line. Guys will cut a piece of the color match coil, especially on the darker colors. I think that's your best bet. If you use a cut piece of white house paper on a dark blue or a dark gray, whatever that one is, and there's any possible movement of the gap, the white house wrap's going to kind of pop. So I would say color match coil would be the best when it comes to butt joint flashing.
Thank you.
Talked about the layout. Oh, look at that. Joint flashing. So in this picture does show like kind of aesthetically this middle picture with the X through it, how it could look if your butt joints are all very close together and not staggered. But here would be kind of what we just discussed. So you'd want a 6-inch wide joint flashing behind the field joints, so the bottom of the flashing overlaps onto the bottom course. So it's just laying there, and this is to prevent wind force rain that could possibly get behind the butt joints to hit that flashing and then come down and out over that next piece of siding that's there. So Hardie panel. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with the products, and it'd be nearly impossible to tell what fasteners that there are. But the good thing is Hardie Pros, JamesHardiePros.com does have all of this stuff. But just to quickly review it, just for your own information, our Hardie panel would be our vertical siding, where you would see most likely nowadays, like this board and batten has gotten very popular. But the vertical butt joints would, again, they'll be meeting on a stud. As you can see here, the moderate contact. These are the fasteners. I know that's not going to be, it's nearly impossible to tell what fasteners they used after it's installed. So I just wanted you guys to have this information, and you don't have to memorize what type of fasteners are used, but JamesHardiePros.com does have that information. So the Hardie panel vertical siding layout. So this would be our Hardie panel butt joints, and we saw a couple examples of this a little earlier when we talked about horizontal breaks. But when someone is doing the board and batten, so board and batten, and I only bring this up because it's been so popular. Our battens are attached after the fact. It doesn't come together. So how your battens would lay would be to cover the butt joints between your panels, as you can see here. And then you can spread out the battens however else you want. You can space them. Most common is, the 16 on center, because once you get to 8, it's a little busy, and 32 is too wide. So most likely you'll see this installation. If for some reason you saw a board and batten job with a Hardie panel butt joint exposed, that's just not a good install. It's not going to affect the product. It's just aesthetically not pleasing, we'll say. To touch on this other quick point I'll touch on here, where it says caulk to joint, where you can leave an 1/8 of an inch gap in between our panels, caulk it. That is an acceptable install if you were doing a field painted job. The product that's sold here in the Northeast is 98 to 90. I think it was 98.7% Color Plus last calendar year, especially residential. Some of the prime, as we call it, that needs to be field painted is in the commercial space. So the caulk to joint, not applicable here. Moderate contact is the way it would go, or a piece of the flashing. So like Tamlin trim is very popular in our area, and fry reglet, where you can do an H channel trim where the panels would butt behind. Depending on what the look, whoever's designing the home, that's their look. It would be one of these two. The caulked joint with our panel would not be something you'll be seeing. And then we discussed the horizontal joint treatment. Horizontal break, you would do your Z flash with a 1/4 inch gap.
Does that H channel almost look like board and batten when it's finished? When you H channel, or does it just look like siding that has an H channel vinyl when it has the board and batten, an H channel on the horizontal? Can you do a horizontal H channel or no?
Yeah, horizontal H channel. No, Tamlin has specifically the channels that they have. Like H would, for the most part, be a vertical channel. The good thing about the people who make the channels, they have them specified in the books on what's for what area. So the horizontal channel, there's a bunch of different options there, but an H would not be one of them.
Thank you.
We'll touch on this portion here real quick. I know we discussed it, but if there was like a band board, so you'll see like the house will have a belly board or band board across the middle, kind of where that floor break is. So this Z flashing would come out and over that belly or band board that's there. So siding similar to plank does need to be, especially I would say Hardie shingle, if it's not broken out like this when you install it, then you can really get zipper lines in your shingle because it comes in a 4-foot board with true keyways. So when it's on the wall, it's made to look like they're all individual shingles. But it does come in a board where it's a blind nail system as well. It is important. It doesn't affect the warranty of it. Again, this is just kind of aesthetically how it's going to look on the home. We look at homes every day. We'll probably notice it, 10 times more than a homeowner would. But I think it was just some good information for you to have. If a homeowner asks, hey, why are all the shingle lines lining up? You can just mention they didn't stagger when they were doing their install. Difference here. So this was first slide was fasteners, and I jumped the gun there a little bit. Started talking about how it is laid out. So cleanup, and you might have. I see this a lot in new construction for the most part, especially with darker colors. So cleaning it, you'd want to use a soft cloth or brush, maybe some mild liquid dish soap, rinse with clean water. You do want to remove the dust. So this is the biggest cleanup issue that I've seen. When you do cut Hardie outside, you do want to have it does make a dust if they're using a chop saw. So you want to be downwind. So when you do cut it, the dust is going away from the home, away from the other products. If the dust does get on the product, that's fine. As long as it's immediately brushed off with a soft like microfiber cloth. And you'll notice this on the darker colors. If it's, and this would be more, I guess, in your guys' business would be if there was a new home that was selling and someone was looking at it and they had a darker color and Hardie dust from cutting it, if it got on the product, a bunch of it, and then it rained and then dried on there, that's where you can see it almost. They're like, why does the finish look so bad? It's because that dust could have possibly gotten wet and then kind of adhered to the outside of the product. It's a possibility. And the only time we do see it for the most part is on those darker colors.
Does the siding hold up well to mold? Does it need to be power washed every 5 years or?
So it's low. So how Hardie describes it is very low maintenance. I will say it does not support the growth of mold. Power wash, you would wash it as anything else when it seems to get dirty. Example, I have a Hardie on my home, and it'll be 2 years, and I noticed it just whether it's kind of dirty. If they are going to power wash it, and we try to, as I've said this before, and I've seen guys in the field, if you do like the widest head, like the softest PSI with power washing, that's fine. If you were giving a recommendation to a homeowner or anybody else, I would say just use a hose, because in over the time of being here, I'd say the recommendations I've given people are said, hey, don't do this, but you could if you do it this way. They tend to do it wrong. So to prevent any issues or anything in the future, you would wash Hardie, and this is how it's been told and throughout Hardie, wash it like it was your car. So that kind of prevents any homeowners or people from being like too aggressive or blowing a hole through it with an insanely aggressive power washer. That's the last thing you want, because then they'll come back to you and be like, you told me it was good to power wash. So it's low maintenance, doesn't support the growth of mold, and you'd wash it like it's your car. No. Not necessarily scrubbing it with your hands.
If you have to repaint it or you want to freshen up the color, it's faded. Spend any type of paint. You have to prime it. You could just paint right over it. Obviously, you could clean it and power wash it. Is there anything that you guys suggest before you paint if you had to?
Yeah, so you would just make sure the product's clean. So obviously you wouldn't just paint over, a 5-year-old dirty house. So you'd clean it, and then it would be a any exterior latex paint. And if you want to mimic the same finish, it would be a satin finish.
How long does the color last? Or let me ask, how long does your product hold up pretty well, where the satin doesn't start, fading? What is it? Is it 5, 10 years that you might have to think about painting it?
So it's a 15-year finish warranty. So everything fades like over time. But Hardie fades at a 33% lower rate than other products. It fades uniformly. Unlike other products, I don't know if you see it on their homes, on other products, it might be blotchy, but the way, the Hardie paint is adhered to the product, it fades uniformly. But it is a 15-year finish warranty. And you'll be asked this question. I've been asked it 100 times a year for 9 years. At 15 years, I have to paint. No, that's just where that finish warranty lets up. Reason being, industry standards. So I think most field paint warranties are under 15 years, and that's really it. So at 15 years, it's not saying your house must be painted to keep the product warranty. That's just saying when the finish warranty on Hardie is up, the product is a 30-year non-prorated warranty, which that's meaning you'll see other products 50-year lifetime, any whatever amount of time their warranties, non-prorated. And sorry if you guys already know this, just means it'll pay out 100% year 1, year 10, year 20, year 29. If something manufacturer like goes wrong with the product, Hardie pays out 100% over the course. Same with the finish. Because I had the lucky job of looking through all of our competitors' warranty documents and finding that out. So that was not a good read, but it was good information because I've been asked a million times, why is your competitor does 50-year warranty? It's well, after year 7, they pay you out at 10%. So is it a 50-year warranty or, so non-prorated 30-year product, non-prorated 15-year finish.
Can you, I'm sorry, I'll let you finish.
No, you're good.
Can you, if there's a bad install, is it repairable without removing the product? With some of these guys that buy it, they don't know how to install it properly. Is there recommendations that you guys give to these contractors, or is there somebody out there that comes in there and, because we'll see it pop in the butt joints, kind of bowed or warped?
Yeah, I think it's on a case-by-case basis, depending on what's wrong. Like an example, I'm sorry, I'm rushing back. So I'll use this picture here. So you see the bump out here. The problem is with Hardie, since it's blind nailed, so you're blind nailing, you're nailing on the nail line, the next plank comes over, blocks it, nail line, and so on. If you had say these 2 middle planks were damaged, it is replaceable. It's just a little difficult. So you pull this plank, the 2 planks you want out, which isn't easy. You try to, cut it, however you're going to do it to get it out. Then you still have those nails that are underneath that next plank that's staying. So you would try to get those nails out. And then you would be face nailing the next two planks. And that's fine as long as you're touching up just the nail heads on those planks. If there are repairs, like in New Jersey, for example, there's like a couple of contractors that market themselves as repair specialists, and they love repairs and that's all they want to do. So there are guys like that. I'm not sure for your guys' particular areas how that works. And we have no problem if you guys call myself or, the Peter Creel, Alex is in Connecticut. We have a bunch of different reps with handling questions on, hey, I actually had, a shingle installed wrong. How would we do it? Be pretty similar on how you replace it, but it's kind of a case by case basis. It is possible to answer your question. It is possible. It is a little more difficult than if it was like a vinyl siding where you could just pull that thing out and get another one in there.
So a lot of this stuff that I'm seeing that you probably see, what are the bowing or they're popping out? That stuff it's just not nailing it either every 8 inches or catching the stud. What are some of the most common things? Because I see it a lot more, even new construction. But what are some of the things that you see right away? And what's going on? With the siding.
Yeah, if it's not laying properly, like when we discuss like moderate contact with the butt joints. So when the trim's already up, and say you're running a plank across, then your next plank's going to meet the plank installed and the trim. If it's a little too long, some guys will kind of shove it in there and to just push it down. That can cause bowing. That's why it's moderate contact. How the house lays, new construction especially, if there's movement in the house, that can cause any popping or bowing. Because for the most part, it's Hardie's going to take the shape of the sheathing and how that house is laying. That's just how Hardie's going to lay. If the house structurally or the sheathing's bowing, something behind it's moving, that's where Hardie could.
Can you correct that? Do you have to face nail to correct it, or you have to pull it out?
No. So if there is bowing, so a good example would be honestly right here on this bottom picture. You can pin nail Hardie anywhere to get it flat. The only problem, and I think that's one of the last things, here, the touch up, is when you do face nail, guys aren't careful with the touch up paint, because when you use field paint on the product, when you first do it, you never notice it. And then 6 months down the road, this field paint faded at a weird rate, and now you see blotches all over your home. But to answer your original question, and we'll touch on the touch-up paint after, is if there's bowing or a butt joint sticking out farther, corrective action would be to shoot a pin nail in that area to flatten it out. Because that's just going to happen.
Are you saying like pin nails? I mean, those are very fine nails. That'll hold it in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So how to touch up, like kind of how we discussed. We talked about the trim where you use a finish nail here. And like when I say pin nail, it would be a finish nail when you're pinning those back. So by terminology was off, I do apologize. But top left would show a cut edge of Hardie. You would use your touch-up paint here, like this coater, to cover that or reseal the cut ends. And then these two to the left show the example we were discussing a little on the previous slide of touch-up paint on the product and how it just fades at a completely different rate. So how Hardie's made is we make the product and then we paint it in-house ourselves. And the way it's painted is it's heated up and it goes through a coater, and then it's heated up again and goes through a second coat. So the finish is baked into the product. So field paint is always going to have a different sheen or a different look over time if you are using the touch-up paint on the face of the board. And some of this stuff, a lot of these calls that I have had over my career at Hardie has been the product's failing. It's delaminating, is what I hear. And then I've made a mistake, I guess you could say. I'm going to some of these homes and I see immediately it's the touch-up paint or the caulk, which would be on the next slide, I think. I won't jump ahead of myself. how to touch up with a nail pen. So for the finished nails we discussed, this was what would be used for those finished nails, just to touch up the nail head. This right side is exactly what happens if someone installed our trim with finished nails, and then they took that blotter from back here, this product, and just touched up all the nail heads. You'd never know. Day of install, a couple days, weeks after, and then it's going to fade at a completely different rate. And you'll have all these polka dots.
Can we get the actual paint color, Tom? If we like say, all right, I saw that. Go, oh my God, it looks like. Could I actually, call you and say, hey, that's Sherwin-Williams, this color or whatever it originally was used, and then just paint that whole corner piece if you had to?
Yes.
Can you do?
Yeah. So Sherwin-Williams, and it always depends on who's behind the counter. If I'm being perfectly honest with you, if they're a new person, they won't know what you're talking about. If they've been at the branch for a while, they'll know. Either way, we have all the Sherwin-Williams color match codes for all of our products. Most Sherwin-Williams, brick and mortars should know, or if you said like the Hardie name, they could look in the system. Again, I've had multiple guys that go there and the guy has no idea what they're talking about, but that's fine. Hardie, we can provide that color match code for you.
Thank you.
So caulk. So caulk is, we do not manufacture the caulk. OSI QuadMax is one of the caulks that are used. So with caulking, again, this is a big aesthetic thing where, like we discussed earlier, you do not caulk horizontally, like over the window and the breaks or the block penetrations. What I will say about caulk, where you would mostly do it, or where you would use the caulk, is vertical siding trim intersections. And it would be where Hardie's meeting the window on the sides and the bottom. This is where you would, or on the sides is where you leave your 1/4 inch gap. On the bottom, it can butt right up. But when it's terminating into a window trim or a corner trim, you would leave an 1/8 of an inch gap, and then you would caulk in that 1/8 of an inch gap. Only terminating into vertical trim, not our butt joints. So that's where you can see some of those issues. But with our caulk as well, guys will take its color match. If there's if they pin nailed or finish nailed, a bump out where 2 butt joints were sitting not flush, they'll take some caulk and just run it over that. And then the caulk, if it's tooled with your finger or put anywhere on the face, it breaks down and it'll bleach out. So OSI QuadMax specifically tells us and all their installers, do not tool the caulk with your finger. The oils in your finger break it down, and the sun will bleach the product. So if you've ever seen a dark blue home with pink marks all over it, the installer got blue caulk on his hand and rubbed it all over the siding. They never thought they'd notice, and then the dark blue bleaches to pink. Not to scare you, but it happens. I've seen it too many times. It's crazy. But yeah, caulk would be vertical siding to trim intersections. Again, this is showing where do not caulk, and you can see this is on this one it bleached white. This was caulk that got on the face of the siding. Don't tool or smear it. Do not caulk in the butt joints. This piece of trim where the vertical trim was meeting the horizontal trim, they caulked. You do not do that. So just some good examples of how not to do it. And that was it.
Very good.
I kind of ran through it. I tried to be as detailed as possible and just, talk, not get too Hardie terminology, and just kind of talk through it as, just some normal guys. So whatever, if you guys still have some more questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Or I can send you guys out my information and Peter's information so you have it in the future. We're more than willing to help you. Don't expect you to be an expert on James Hardie installation, but more than happy to support you in any way.
I think we have one of our guys is typing something now. I know we're going to do part 2 on the 18th. Maybe Peter will do that, or possibly you. And one of our members just said, this was great, Tom, much appreciated.
Oh, no problem.
So that's good. Scott, do you have anything else?
No, thanks a lot, Tom. What we're also going to do, Tom, is we're going to do I'll talk to you this. I'll get you. We'll talk about doing a link. So any of our members, any people that are out there inspecting, they can, go right to your, link you to your website. That we can also put your number on there as a contact if they have any questions as far as if they see something in the field. And
Yeah.
appreciate
Perfect.
it. Was
The
good.
good thing is too, we have reps locally spread out. So if there's someone that's over here or over there, we have a rep for that area, and there's a bunch of us. So if someone's not available, someone will be able to get back to them in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, if we have
Perfect.
any buyers or something that have a question about, how the siding is, we can always send them your way.
Yeah, not a problem.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Look at that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Very informative. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
So
guys.
I'm gonna be ending the seminar now. If anybody has any questions, email us anytime, and we will be in touch with our next seminar on the 18th. Thank you very much.